Hi, my name is Cel, and I'm your host for the SweatNet Be Amazing Podcast, where we share stories of amazing women who live in our communities. My hope is that you will feel encouraged and inspired after listening to each episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be Amazing Podcast. I'm your host, Cel, and I'm so excited that you've joined me today for another inspiring episode. And I want to give you a little bit more insight to this episode and why it is special to me or close to my heart. My guest today, I actually met her during 2020. It was actually late, I want to say late summer, early fall. It was actually a group of women, and it all started with my friend Tracy. She had reached out. I had met her through a nonprofit in Charlotte. We'd done some work for the same nonprofit and connected. And she'd reached out to me wanting to see if I would train she and several of her girlfriends because she was dealing with some really difficult times in her life and just needed to relieve stress. And I was happy to do so. So I met with them for several months, and just it made such an impact on me. Like, yes, they were getting to work out, but they really touched my heart at the same time. And it was just an incredible experience. And through that, I met my guest today, Bess Kercher. And she is a mom of two boys. She is a wife, a mother, and she is also an author. And I was so intrigued that she had written her first novel, and it had released, I don't think it had released that long before we all started working out. But the name of the novel is called Now and at the Hour. And Bess is not only going to talk about the book and really tell you there's a story behind the story, but she's also going to share her journey with it in writing it. And to me, there's so much value in that. And the advice that she gives is amazing. And it's going to be something that you can not only to apply to yourself if you're planning to write a book, but you can really apply it to anything. So get ready for an incredible conversation with Bess. Hi, Bess. I am so glad to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Cel. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we have an interesting story because I actually met you last year. This is after, COVID shut down. And there's a group of women that were supporting one specific friend to work out. And it was during those workouts that I met you at the park, which was so cool.
Yes, it was. That was such an unexpected gift. So many things about that. But it was just so cool to have a space where we could safely gather and, really have a workout for our bodies, but just also, sort of a social workout, which was so lacking during that time. And just support each other, like just try to be healthy all the way around. So, yes, I'm so thankful.
That's so cool. Well, let's get started, but you got to tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Ooh, who am I? What a question. Well, I am a 50-year-old woman as of this past year. I am a married mother of two boys. My oldest is getting ready to graduate from high school in just a few weeks, which I cannot believe. My youngest is a sophomore in high school. So, except for the dog, we are very heavy on the boys' team over here, which may be why I was fleeing to Freedom Park to see the ladies.
That's it.
During the pandemic. But let's see, when my kids were fairly small, I would say 2 and 4, I went back to school. A little shout out to Queen's University of Charlotte to get a master's degree in communications. And after that, I began freelancing as a writer and contributed to Huffington Post and to the Charlotte Observer. And I blogged for several years on the Observer's Mom Charlotte platform. And then last year, I published my debut novel, which is a middle grade story called Now and at the Hour, which is about a 12-year-old boy who navigates a significant year when his mom is diagnosed with cancer. So that's me.
Which is really cool. And this is a lot of what I wanted to bring you on and talk about because
I think the fact that you have, published this novel and there's a story behind it, there's a story behind the story. But when did you, because you went to school for, like you said, you went back to school for communications. When did you really start? Have you been writing your whole life, or just were all of a sudden inspired to start writing? Or is that, and maybe that's just your form of communication in general?
I would say kind of a little bit of all of that. I would say for as long as I can remember, I've always loved to read. So I've always been a big reader, and um, I've always been a little bit of an introvert. And as a child, was fairly shy. So I think I loved immersing myself in stories. And then also the space where I felt most comfortable communicating was through writing. And that all sort of carried forward into my adult life. And I was an English major in college. I kind of dabbled in creative writing then. Um, but it wasn't until I went back to graduate school where I had to write a ton for my program that I really just had the opportunity and the time to recognize that passion was sort of rekindled in me. And I I had to do the writing, the assigned writing, but I had a lot of freedom in the way that I went about it, in terms of really being able to hone and find my own voice. There are a lot of people in my program who were coming from professional spaces, the hospital or the banks. And, I was coming from a stay-at-home mom situation. So, I'm like crashing in there with, a hot mess, basically. And I'm trying so desperately to immerse myself in this intellectual space and make a contribution, while my brain was just sort of in going a million different directions, kind of on the home front. And but what I found was, even within that space, like I had things to say, and that I had things to say that only I could say, and that everyone who was in that program had a different contribution to make. And so that was really um, an interesting and unique way to kind of find my voice as a writer. And ironically, even though it seemed so counter to trying to have that, really smart, uh, focused voice within my program, having the small kids at home, what I ultimately ended up writing the most about was being a mom when I was blogging on the Mom Charlotte platform. So, sometimes you can't ever anticipate how those things will come full circle. And you just sort of have to keep trusting the process and just moving forward in whatever way you can. So I think definitely once I was in graduate school, I wanted to be a writer. I definitively, you know, wanted to pursue that in some way, on the back end.
I think that's so awesome. And I think it's interesting to hear you say, like, you found your voice, because I'm sure when you started school, even with the intention of wanting to be a writer, you didn't really realize at that point, like, how much you're going to discover about you and about the voice you actually had.
Absolutely. And I think, it was so, I just had to let go of just a lot of fear around trying. I remember when I applied for my program, I think it took, might have might have been like 6 months to finish writing the application. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Okay, so that means it will probably take me like 3 years to finish a class, and like I'll graduate in 3 decades. I mean, like, this is ridiculous. Like, there's just no way. And that fear of failure can be so intense that you don't even, it is sometimes can be very difficult to even try. Um, but, I think if you can just take some of those risks and put yourself out there, you know, you can reap such great rewards. And I say that as someone who is fully risk averse. I I am not, I am not. I don't know if you've ever studied the Enneagram. Have you ever?
No, I've
Yeah.
heard about it. I have not studied it.
So for people who know the Enneagram, I'm an Enneagram 6. And basically that just means like scanning for threats, like safety, secure, like, and so it's just really, so I'm saying now, like, just, take risks and risk failure. But it is probably, I would say, a constant struggle for me to take my own advice. But I do recognize that looking back on my life, that has been the catalyst for so many important uh, transformational experiences in my life, including graduate school and then subsequently writing.
Yeah, and the thing that you're talking about with fear and risk, like there was a lot of that you did in writing this book, because you're taking on a story and you're writing a story, and I'm sure in just how that you're writing it, there's that fear of like, you know, am I going to do it justice, or is everybody going to get the full story of what's going on? So I'd like to hear a little bit more about the story behind the book.
Yes. Well, everything that you've said resonates with me. And this particular story, there are several things that sort of lined up that now I can look at retrospectively and see how they all provided the space for this particular story to come forward. There were three things. One was years ago. My younger son, he'll so appreciate that I'm distinguishing which one it was. My younger son made the announcement that he hated to read, just like not going to do it. Like, just did not care for it. Thank you. And for me, I was like, what? Sorry, what? What? But my response to that was, I just think you haven't found the right book yet. And so even though he was well beyond the time when we would typically read together, he would read to me or I would read to him, we started doing that again. And when we came across the middle grade novel Wonder, it really changed everything for both of us. He found a book that he really enjoyed and was willing to admit that maybe there were other books in the world that were tolerable also. But for me, it really planted a seed that maybe someday I would want to write or attempt to write something similar. And that is to say, a meaningful story that deals with serious subject matter, but in a way that was manageable for kids. So that seed was planted. And then many years later, I had sort of an inspired trip to San Francisco, which helped to fuel my decision to set this story there. But my most important inspiration for this story came from the experience of a friend, Sherry, as she was diagnosed and battled cancer. She had such a powerful personality, was such a charismatic person, just such an incredible energy. And so when she received that very difficult news, like all of that and who she was, like really served her well as she tried to navigate what came next, which included multiple surgeries and treatments. And at one point, on the back end of much of that, she made the decision that she wanted to travel to Rome with her husband. And she wanted to go there to pray. And that idea seemed at once a perfect idea because sort of in need of a miracle, and also a completely fraught idea because her situation was very tumultuous at that time. She would be fine, and then she would be in the hospital, in and out. And but they did go, and they were able to experience that trip. And when she reflected upon it, when she was on the trip and when she came back, those reflections about her life and about her faith were so profoundly moving to me. It just changed me. And I just felt so strongly that that was something that deserved to be out in the world, that there had to be a way to share it. But of course, I mean, it was her inspiration. It was her story, and I talked to her about it, and I said, it may be that you don't want anyone to tell this story. It may be that you want to tell it. It may be that you're not interested in having these sort of larger lessons fictionalized in some way. But she was very much behind it. And she said, I would love for it to be out in the world, and I would really love for you to try to do it. And so after she died, I really became committed to finishing it and trying to see it, all the way across the finish line to exist as an actual real book you could hold in your hands, in the world.
That's incredible. How long did it actually take you to write the book?
Well, it's so those conversations from the time when those first initial idea, not even really understanding what kind of story or how it would be told or who would be in it, from the time when it existed as an actual book, I want to say almost 6 years of working on it. When I started writing it, I was halfway through writing a women's fiction novel. And I was blogging for The Observer, and I was, I had a lot of other things going on. And so I started this project also, and was just getting pulled in so many different directions. And interestingly, there were 3 kind of projects: the women's fiction novel, this novel, and a nonfiction book that I was working on. And I just felt pulled in so many different directions. And I had a friend who was an editor who agreed to look at sort of a pitch for all of them and the initial pages for all of them, and then to tell me which, in her opinion, she felt like I should focus on first. And so I prepared all of that and then gave it to her. And then when we met, she said, okay, I have read through everything, and I think for sure you should start with the women's fiction novel. And my heart just sank. I was like, oh no. She didn't pick the middle grade. And so the whole time she's talking, she's saying, you're further along in that. You've, invested more time. And so finish that first. And I just could not stop thinking of the other book. And it's kind of funny to think now, I mean, at the time I was like, well, she said this one, so I'm doing it. And I just couldn't, and then finally I was like, hello, friend, what you wanted was an answer of where your energy should go. Where was your heart? What was your, and you have your answer. Write the book that you now know that you should really focus on. And so it became a clearer focus at that time. And then again, once my friend passed away, I was just very immersed in it. But there was a lot at that point that I was writing that I couldn't use because I was really grieving that loss through the writing. And which, on the back end was a gift in its own way. But at the time it was just, just a lot to have to navigate. But that's, once I decided that, this was the project I wanted to do, and this was the project I had to do, then, I was faced with the reality that I wrote about kids a lot, but I had never written for them. And even though I had that other seed that had been planted those years before, I, had a lot of work to do to figure out all of the pieces of a middle grade novel and how to try to execute them well.
That's so cool. You said something really interesting. I'm going to back up just a little bit. When you went to the editor because you're looking for her to confirm your answer you had in your own heart. And I think about how many times I've done that, where I'm looking for somebody to confirm it. So I feel like I'm not crazy or I'm on track. And I think there's such truth when you have to finally come to grip that they're not going to have that same connection or that same, somebody on the outside might not really get all the things that have gone behind the scenes to lead us to the point or a decision. And there are times where I think we have to go with what we feel heart-wise. Not all the time. I mean, there's some things that you have to make, certain decisions on, but there's a lot of times I think when we question ourselves and we, start to trust your own gut.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because I think it's like you, only you know what that passion is, where that creative energy is, all those things, that inspiration, all that, whatever it is that fuels, your capacity to be able to move something forward and to create and to have it manifest in a certain way. I think the flip side that you've alluded to too, which was definitely true for me and through just the process of writing and publishing, I think you have to constantly kind of search for, evaluate, and sort of affirm that piece of which we were just speaking. But also you have to be open to instruction, to information, to possibly rejection, to like the process of realizing whatever it is that you are attempting to do. And I think that is a tricky thing to navigate when it is something that's very close to your heart, because, to put it out there is sort of make yourself vulnerable to criticism, to whatever it is. But then to have it exist in the best way it possibly can will require you to accept that kind of information and feedback, and just to, remain sort of constantly committed to trying to do better, trying to do the best that you can, but also realize this goal that you have been able to identify for yourself.
I love all of that. I love the part about being open and, it's almost being coachable in a sense. In that way that you can kind of evolve through the entire process of what you committed to doing. I think that's just so awesome. And 6 years is a long time to work on it, on any project. And I don't mean like, I expect somebody to whip out a book in, 10 days, but when it's when it's a true project, and a novel definitely is, and to see the commitment to it and all that you've poured into it, every bit of you is probably in that book.
For better or for worse. Well, and let's just, this will be a good time to say it is a debut novel. It is definitely an imperfect little book, but there is so much of my heart in that book. And, part of why the road was so long was just that there were several moments when I had to, pump the brakes and say, okay, this part isn't working. This isn't, I'm getting feedback. And by the way, when you get feedback from, say, agents who are rejecting your work, it doesn't feel like a gift at the time, but it can be. It is. I mean, it is, because, it allows you to re-examine everything. And what I found is, even, at times I would find myself in the situation where one person would have one take as a criticism, and then someone else would have the opposite take. And so in the end, you still have to reconcile and decide, am I keeping this? Am I not? Am I changing this? Am I not? But I think it's that whole process of being intentional and being strategic and being humble and willing enough to listen, and then decide, and move forward in the best way that you can for your story or for your project. But I laugh a lot to think about the most confident that I ever was about this novel was the day that I wrote the end for the first time, of like 5 times. Oh, that was such a good day. Like almost just like, it makes me smile, like also want to cry, like just to think how I was like, it's done. It's hello, who wants this book? It's amazing. I just felt like, yes, like I did it. And I had done it. I had done a first draft. A first draft is never a last draft. It's just not, and there are whole storylines in the novel as it exists now that weren't in it then, that came from subsequent readers and feedback, and getting that information and being able to see, okay, well, there's a part here that's not working. There's a hole here. There's, and then saying, okay, so what else? How can I make it better? And I would say you said something early on that is probably, I still grapple with this. It's still my biggest fear about the book, is just that, just wanting to do justice to the experience of my friend who inspired it. And I just don't know in some ways that it's even possible to have done that. But I do think that there were so many incredible things about her spirit and her energy, and so many incredible things that can be positive even in terrible times, that I do think that through the writing the book and in the book, I tried to honor the reality of those experiences and how hard they are and how heartbreaking they are, but also lift up the things that transcend them and transcend those hard parts of life. And so, you just do the best you can.
Well, I think it's a beautiful way to share someone's story. I love stories so much, and which is, this podcast is all about that. But to share someone's story in that unique way with such heart behind it is really sweet and really just like amazing.
Well, you're very, very sweet and amazing. So thank you. It is a little surreal to be able to like actually hold it in my hands and just have this piece that just for me like keeps her so close. And so that for that, I'm very grateful. And it's interesting, there are certain parts of the books that I've had some opportunity to do some readings and different things. And the book is a completely fictionalized story. It's about a 12-year-old boy who lives in San Francisco, and he's a Catholic school kid, a skateboarder, lives with a single mom. And so all of that is just completely made up. But there are parts of the story that were inspired by things that happened when I was really grieving Sherry. And it's not, it's fictionalized, so it's not even, it's interesting. Like I can't read those parts out loud. Like I can't get through. And there have been several times when I've tried to, and it's not even that they would be necessarily that sad or that significant necessarily to someone else, but it's just and then I realized that there's something really amazing and beautiful in that,
Mm.
that like how it exists outside of me and my experience is just a completely different thing. And um, it does feel like a gift to just have the opportunity to try to make that happen.
And I
So,
think that's awesome. Like that you going back and reading it, like it's your connection. It's that memory of her. It's that, all the things that you experienced, the process that you went through. And here it
yeah,
is. It's this book that other people are reading and they don't know all that went behind it, which is what, makes it so special and which is why I wanted for you to share. So what if there's somebody that is kind of toying around with the idea of writing a book, or maybe it's somebody that might be starting to write, do you have like 3 tips that you would give someone?
I can give you 3 tips, and I'm gonna add an extra one. I'm gonna say, let's
A 3
assume before,
plus.
yeah, 3 plus.
Plus.
My foundation pre-tip that we can just will be our assumption is to actually write. So we're going to assume that people will know, like, and that sounds silly to say, but sometimes just make sure that you are setting aside the time, that you are actually put, pen to paper or hand to keyboard, or just, so let's say you are writing, so you're working on it. So um, I would say, based on my experience, first of all, just learn as much as you can and never stop learning, and stop trying to um, improve your writing. I think the thing that is so tricky is that you don't know what you don't know until you do, and until you do. And so, kind of thinking back to my experience of my first draft, where I was like, it's done, and it was so not done, but it could never be done if it wasn't in the place that it was at that time. So it's all moving you to the right direction. But any opportunity that you have to, you know, take an online course, to read a book, to hear other authors talk, to any of that, it just will help. It will serve you so well to be open to that and to constantly be doing that. I think it's really important to identify the goals you have for your own project and your book. Some people may say, like, this is going to be the next New York Times bestseller. I want to be traditionally published. I want to, query agents. I want, um, you know, I see my book in this particular space. This is what I will use my book for. This is what I hope it does in the world. But those answers can be different for each book and for each author. And so I think um, it's not really just one right way. And I think that if you can identify what you're hoping to see happen on the back end, and kind of what you see, how you see this project or this book fitting into your career as a writer, and then what you want to subsequently have happen with that. Um, I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle as people are figuring out moving forward. And then I think the most important thing is to find your people, like find that community that is going to help you navigate all of it. And for me, I mean, there were so many different spaces that made this book possible. Even going back to my grad school community, that was such an affirming, amazing space to try to find my voice as a writer, to my writing group, which I'm in a writing group with 3 other local writers, Kimmery Martin, Tracy Curtis, and Trish Rohr. And, having that space with those women who, I mean, are just brilliant and inspiring and creative people in their own right, but also can offer practical support and emotional support, and, can help you to be brave and strong as you're navigating a process like this. To like my publishing company, Warren Publishing, there's an amazing group of women there. To the bigger writing community in Charlotte, we are so lucky here. Writers are so lucky here because we have wonderful public libraries, our independent bookstores, Park Road Books and Main Street Books in Davidson, the Charlotte Writers Club, the Charlotte Readers Podcast, it's just, there are so many spaces. And so finding that community and then being a part of it, meaning not just that you receive from the community, but that you give. I think that process of being a support and getting support is such an empowering piece. And then, you have other people who can be a part of your successes and your process, and you are a part of theirs. It's just such a positive space. If we're talking about writing and publishing in particular, in a journey that is not always so much. So just, as Jen Hatmaker, who's a writer, would say, like, find a soft place to land, like create that soft place to land with your people.
That's so great. This is why you and I connected so well, because we talked. We were talking about the podcast and what, we were going to talk about the book and all of that. And then we started talking about this piece of it where you're talking about how community is important to you, and that community is different. You said it again. It's different. It's almost like different pockets or different spaces. And I'm the same way. I have friends in fitness. I have friends that are women that are business. I have, I have friends that are into competing. I have friends that, there's just so many different sides. And so when we had talked about it, that really resonated with me. And the fact that you're giving them as a lot of credit of how you really pushed forward, I would have to say the same thing about me too, is like, I would be doing half the things I'm doing if I didn't have a soft place to land, a community to be a part of. And it's not just one community, it's multiple, but they're all under under the big umbrella, of my community. Just depends on which one I'm tapping into or where I'm investing or giving into. But it's such an important piece. And sometimes I don't know that it always gets as, especially when we talk about women, sometimes the cattiness or things can come up and kind of the negative, people can the negative can kind of cloud. And that's just, for me, it's been positive. And you said the same thing. Like, my community is positive. Like, everybody is there to lift each other up and, high fives and encouragement. Now, they'll shoot straight. Some of them will shoot straight with you from the hip when you need to hear it. Like, that's not a good idea. Like, Cel, that's not a good idea. But for the most part, it's like it's a give. That is for me.
Yes, I think absolutely. It's interesting because, if you're situated in what is an affirming space, then when people are saying, okay, Cel, I'm wondering, okay, maybe not so much this thing, like, but that you are hearing that from someone who only wants good things for you. And, then again, we can go back to like what we've talked about before. So then you take that in the spirit that's intended, and then you kind of work through it and you figure out, what you need to do moving forward. But I think that there's so much just in life generally, definitely with the writing and publishing process, that can be so, so punishing. You have to have such a thick skin so just having that space where, you are seen as sort of a full human being and appreciated, and where you also help people and are a support to them. I just think it is so critical. And I do think, there's definitely a stereotype about women not being able to do it. But I have to say, like in my life experience, overwhelmingly, the most wonderful communities I've had the pleasure to participate in are there. I think they're men. Well, not in graduate school, it was a mix of men and women, but I just overwhelmingly it's women. So, and I think part of that is like you need to bring to that space the energy that you want to find there. And so that's another sort of empowering piece of it.
That's a big piece of it because you do bring an energy. So, your vibe they say the quote is what your vibe attracts your tribe. And there's a lot of truth in that statement. But there's so much power when you have all of that positive energy in one space. Like it really can fuel you to do some incredible things, just like with you writing this book. And so I just appreciate you sharing that aspect because I think it's very important to me. So it was awesome to hear you and how it has really played that kind of role for you as well.
Yeah. And I think that's why you and I kind of had that connection in the beginning, because I don't even remember how we exactly started talking about it, but we have just both had such important experiences within that space and just had identified how important that was and how important it continues to be. And so I just think that, and to the extent that we have also touched upon off the podcast, just that, we all felt the loss of that this past year. And it really does underscore the importance of it. I would say for me, the writing community, my writing group, the publishing community, my publisher, it's just, it's been a real gift to be able to be a part of all of those spaces.
So
grateful.
So where can somebody get the book?
Oh yeah. Speaking of my publisher, hello. Hi, Bess. Anything else you might want to mention? So you may get the book at Park Road Books. They're signed copies at Park Road Books if you're in Charlotte. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Main Street Books in Davidson. You can get it from Warren Publishing. If you go to besskercher.com, there are links to all of those places and spaces where you can order it. And there also is more information about the book if you're just curious to know more about the story. And
where can they follow you? Because I know you're on social media.
I am on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. I'm at Bess Kercher. On Twitter, I'm May Mucho, which is actually a pen name that I originally blogged under. A little known fact. That's a fun fact about me.
That is a fun fact. I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yes.
That's cool.
So, yes. So check it out.
Well, we're going to switch gears because I have to say, one reason I knew we were kindred spirits was the fact that during the workout, and I would throw out, I would give you all 30 seconds to move or do and you're over there breaking it down in a cheer routine. And I was like, this woman is a kindred spirit. I already know it. I already need to know her beyond her being a part of this fitness group. So that right there was a signal to me. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes. Well,
we all get along so well.
Well, so now I have to give a shout out to the Letter Girls, West Charlotte High School, class of 88. Go Lions. Yes. But yes, so
it was so fun. I loved it. I didn't learn the routine, but it was so fun watching.
Well, it was so funny because, we talked about this. So during the pandemic craziness, when everything shut down and there was not, initially there was nothing, we just didn't know how to navigate it. and everything was so depressing and everything was so hard. And, I was just trying to figure out like, okay, I'm going to go for a walk or a run or whatever. And so I was like, what can I do? And I was like, I bet I could remember that Let a Girl Dance. I think and so I made it like, okay, if my children could hear this right now, they would be like dying. They would be under the table. Oh my gosh. But I did. I remembered it. You know, I would go into my bedroom and start the music. And that was my little workout for a while. So then when I intersected with you, you're like, just do what you feel. I'm like, all right, you asked for it, lady.
Totally breaking it down. It was awesome. And that's how I knew. I was like, oh, she and I are going to get along so well, just from the fact that she's in the middle. We're in the park on the basketball court. Everybody's doing their own thing, and Bess is breaking out a cheer dance.
And by own thing, that was like marching in place, or like jumping jacks,
right?
Or
breaking out the Lions dance.
Breaking out
awesome.
Yes.
Well, do you have anything specific that you're doing now as far as workouts, or is there something that you do now that you enjoy other than cheer dance? Is there other things that you do?
Woo. Well, now that it is so pretty, I love being outside. I love to walk, and I'm not naturally a runner, but I have trained for a half marathon before. So occasionally I will do that. So in keeping with my like wanting to be a little off the beaten path and kind of fun, another throwback exercise thing that I have on the radar that I'm hoping to do next is to buy a new pair of roller skates. And so the next time you're in Freedom Park, you may see me.
Awesome.
Because that was a real love of mine many, many years ago.
That's
and
so
so I'm
cool.
excited to kind of pick that up again. But I would say, in general, my favorite workouts and exercise options always involve connection to something or people who are just fun and just make me laugh or smile, which is why I'm doing the West Charlotte Letter Girls dance in my bedroom, or I'm in Freedom Park with you.
Right.
Or I'm training for a half marathon with my husband because he was a fabulous runner. And we found this race in Myrtle Beach on Valentine's Day. And it's like, well, let's do it. And that kind of energy can take me a long way.
I love that. It's so true. It's amazing what you can do if you're surrounded by the right energy or the right group of people. Like you'll do things you didn't think you would even, before even give it thought.
Yes.
So that's freaking awesome. What about now? So if you're working out, so let's say if you're going out for a walk or run, or you're, you've got, a different type of workout you're doing, do you listen to music or do you listen to podcasts?
It really depends on my mood. I often, when I'm walking, I typically like to listen to podcasts. And that's just sort of my space. It's sort of like, it reminds me of kind of like my reading space, but it's just a different, when I'm walking, and then I tend to love to do that. If I'm running or I'm doing any kind of cardio workout or anything, I love to listen to music. But again, it kind of depends. There's not necessarily a specific go-to anthem, but just kind of my mood. But I love to be distracted by music. And again, I think that's just such an easy way to kind of be infused with that fun energy. If you're having a hard time finding it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting that you say that, because I know I've had some people go, I don't listen to music at all. I listen to just podcasts. And I'm like, all right. Because I switch gears, I'm podcasts for certain things and just like you, music for others. And of course it'll depend on the mood, but I'm always fascinated by that. And I wasn't sure because you're a writer. So I was like, I wonder if she's podcast or music, but I know you like to break out the cheer dance. So music.
I mean, desperate times.
Yes, I know, but it's so great. I love it. Listen, I break out my own stuff in my own room. So like in my own dance routine. It's so fun.
I'm so grateful you just kept showing up to Freedom Park knowing what was coming and that you're going to be publicly in this, my world. Woo! We got some fun stuff going on over here.
Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking time out to be with me today right here. And I ask this question every time, but is there anything else on your heart that you want to share with our listeners?
I think that right now, I feel like we're in such an interesting time and space where things are kind of opening back up and people are trying to navigate being out in the world and being back together again and all of those things. And I would just say, just be kind to yourself and just be kind out there. I think it has been just such a hard time for so many people and for just everyone, and that one thing that when we had this sort of collision of like politics and pandemic and all of these things, that we sort of lost that default space, which is just sort of approaching someone with openness and kindness. And I am personally working on that myself. But also turn it inward, just be kind.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today and sharing your story. And I can't wait to read your book because that's something I really want to do, knowing the story behind it. So, just thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for joining me today. If you like the podcast, please like and share this with other women in your life. You can find out more about SweatNet on sweatnet.com or follow them on Instagram at SweatNet and SweatNet Charlotte. You can follow me personally on Instagram at Cel Smart. Stay tuned for the next episode of the SweatNet Be Amazing Podcast.